use some of the ways you communicate and speak so the interviewers will listen, okay? So that they will know why you're very good at what you do. But she really, truly is a mentor of mine. You know that I'm a certified behavior analyst, and Nancy was a person that mentored and coached and trained me in that. So she's known as, we call her the Disc Wizard, and so she's very, very good at what she does. You're very lucky to be able to sit and listen to her today, take advantage of what she says. She really has some very good information to share with you today. So without further ado, ma'am, do your magic.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot my wand.
Yeah, just gonna start a sign sheet.
So I am the first one that told Annie she was certifiable,
Yeah.
correct?
I will agree that I am.
So let me explain the hat so that I can take it off, because otherwise I end up with a horrendous hair day, okay? So I am known as the Disc Wizard, and let me tell you how that happened. 11 years ago, I can't even stand up straight with this on. 11 years ago, I started a consulting business where I helped companies hire the right people for the job. I am a behavioral analyst, and I used my assessment tools and my analyzation of the job to make sure that candidates were a right fit. So about 4 years into it, I had a client say to me that my predictions that he thought they were scary accurate. He said, "It's like you have a crystal ball." I then accidentally mentioned that to a few friends of mine, and they just ran with it. And they said, "You have to do something with it because it's such a great illustration of what you do. You tell people how a candidate's going to act on the job, and then they get on the job, and lo and behold, they start doing that." So I became the Disc Wizard, I don't know, I think 2007, something like that. And where I thought it might be a little hokey and a little funny to go to conferences like this, to go to speaking engagements like this, if I showed up without the hat, people didn't want to listen. I had clients, when I showed up, CEOs say to me, "Where's the hat? Come on, you're the Disc Wizard, where's the hat?" So now I go nowhere without the hat. But I can't wear it. Bad hair day. So let me tell you a little bit about why I'm going to share what I'm going to share. So I'm sharing my knowledge from the perspective of you being on one side of the desk, whereas I spend most of my time with the people that are on the other side of the desk, right? The interviewers. Those are my clients. But I have been on many interviews, so now I'm going to tell you why I'm qualified to share on this topic. I was a random job seeker in my mid to late 20s, even early 30s. I held so many positions in a couple years, my resume was embarrassing. It was like Swiss cheese. There were holes in it. There were mysteries and all that. So I have been on that side of the desk a lot. I also worked at a employment agency, so that I was doing intakes and preliminary interviews with people that walked in. And by the way, if you're going to employment agencies, do not fool yourself. Those are interviews. Dress for them like you would dress for an interview. Show up prepared because they're screening you just like if they were going to send you to a client of theirs. So, and for the last 11 years, I have coached, educated, and trained dozens, if not hundreds, of hiring managers on how to do that process better so that they get a better candidate matched for their job. So given all that, do you think I'm qualified to share a little bit with you over the next 55 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, good, because otherwise we're just going to have a party. Forget the learning. You guys have done enough of that today. So in the materials for this workshop, there were some bullet points. And one of the bullet points said I was going to share with you the #1 way to reduce anxiety when you're interviewing, when you're job searching. So I thought I would have Dilbert, I know I'm probably in your way, have Dilbert share it with you. So tell me, Brian, why do you want to work for this company? Well, to be honest, I don't. I'm using this as a practice interview. I guess we're done here. Hello, it's lunchtime. I don't see any sandwiches. So you would think that people would be smart enough not to say that. But that is actually one of the secrets to avoiding the anxiety that comes with a job search. It's get as many interviews as you can. Now, I know that's a challenge in of itself. I get it. It's a very different world nowadays about how you go about getting a job interview. It's not as easy as it used to be, just dropping a resume off at someone's office. And I have a whole nother talk, by the way, that's about that how to get more interviews. But sometimes I hear people say that they have an interview lined up that they're not excited about. Or they got an opportunity for an interview, but it's so not in a field they're interested in, they said no. And that to me is a mistake. Because the way I look at it is two things happen when you line up as many interviews as you can. One, not all your eggs are in the same basket, right? So what happens when you have a date coming, but it's the only date you've had in years? There's so much pressure on that date, right? You're so nervous. You're like, this has got to be the one because I don't know when I'm going to get another date. It's the same with interviews. If it's the only one you've got, if it's your dream job, and if it's the only one you've been on, you're pretty nervous. The second reason is interviewing is like dating. You need practice to get good at it. So I say take as many interviews as you can get, even if you're not seriously interested in the job, just go for the practice. Although don't say that, because that kind of would be a killer. Okay, so here's something I'd like you to do. I want you to just take a couple minutes, if you have paper and a pen, and write down the toughest interview you've ever had. Okay, just a couple minutes. Toughest interview you've ever had. What were the circumstances and what was the interviewer like? So go ahead and do that now. And if anybody needs paper or a pen, just turn to your neighbor and see if they're willing to share. Yeah, no problem. For those who aren't writing it down, you're thinking about it, right? Or are you on like your grocery list at this point? I got to get milk, I got to get bread. Okay, is there anyone that would be willing to share, just really like succinctly, the circumstances and what the interview was like? Yes?
It was a job that I really didn't want. It was a group interview. There was 6 interviewers, and it was just nerve-wracking. There was good cop, bad cop. I don't know what cop. And it was just, it didn't know. One interviewer to the other didn't really seem cohesive because it didn't know what the other one was going to ask.
Okay, could everybody hear her? Okay, so she had a group interview situation, and she didn't really want the job, so I'm imagining you love the information I just gave, right? She's like, yeah, don't do that. But it was the group interview situation, so you got the good cop, the bad cop, I don't know what cop that is, but high pressure, definitely high pressure. Okay, I've had those as well. And on the other side of the desk, I actually recommend them. I don't recommend 6 because I actually think with 6 interviewers, you can so intimidate a candidate, a good candidate, that you don't get a true interview. So I wouldn't recommend 6, but 2 or 3 I actually do recommend for various reasons. Okay, anyone else want to share? Okay, yes?
I also had a group interview of about 7 people, and they were scripted. And, you could just see that they were asking the questions that the HR person had. And I felt like I did really well, except for the last question I wasn't prepared for. And that was where they asked me how I handled disappointment in the job. And I just sat there, couldn't think of a thing to say. And needless to say, I didn't get the job. Now I can't imagine it was just because of that one question, but wasn't prepared for that.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. And so Stephanie, if you couldn't hear her, she said the same thing. Group interview situation, she did really well leading up to it. And then the last question threw her, which is, how do you handle disappointment in the job? My sarcastic self would have said, well, I've never had disappointment in the job. And I hope they would have laughed, but that doesn't always work. Okay, another one. Yes?
This is back when Kodak still used to own Elm Grove. I was already slated for you have 60 days to get a job or you're out the door. I took a committee interview doing the same kind of work over in 3 buildings over. Turns out the technology that we're using in Building 5 was outdated. They had new questions, new concept, how to get the same job done faster. And we didn't know it over here. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why we're being outsourced.
So was the interview all about the new technology, the new way of doing things, and you're sort of lost going, what?
Some of the stuff, but not the new stuff.
Yeah. So I just want to ask a question. How many of you have been in that situation where you go into an interview thinking you're prepared, and then all of a sudden the questions they're asking, you're like, whoa, what field am I in? You know?
And it's your same field.
Yeah, no, I know, I get it.
And I knew the engineers that were asking the questions because they were former customers back over in the old building.
Right. No, I'm just saying, I see a lot of nodding heads, John, so if you look around, people have been there in that situation where you're like, what are they asking me? I myself went through that as well. Okay, yes?
This was an early interview I had, and I knew I blew it after it was done, but they asked you a question like this, well, tell me about yourself. And then I kiddingly said, well, where do you want me to start?
I went to kindergarten.
But then I droned on and on too long. I knew I bored my interviewer, and I blew it after that. I kind of lost his interest very quickly.
Yeah.
I went on too long.
Right. So if you couldn't hear him, he said he rambled on and on once they asked the question in the beginning, tell me about yourself. Like it's such an open-ended question, we start to talk about ourselves. How many of you have gotten nervous on an interview and just started rambling? Yeah, and the rest of you are lying who didn't put up your hands. Because I know it happens because I'm on the other side of the desk.
It's kind of like trying to fill in dead air, too. You don't know what
Right.
you're going to get, so you just
It happens on dates as well. I'm no longer single, but I was single for a long time, and dates were like that. If there was this moment where nobody was talking, my personality, I would just start chatting. I'd end up telling them exactly where I went to kindergarten, which you can imagine how many second dates there were.
Something along those lines. I was a presenter for, some people might know, the Excellence program a few years ago. And one of the things they took the presenters through a speaking course on how to speak to a group of people such as this. If you put out a question, actually let it time to soak in. Don't rush to it because they don't know what they're trying to do. So sometimes that air is good. They're thinking, but again, how long do you know how far to go or not?
Right. So what I'm going to share with you today, and thank you for that. So basically he said the dead air isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it gives you time to think, and you can look more together, more reflective when you give that question a moment to think about. If you come back immediately, sometimes they think, well, that was too fast. That sounded like it was planned. I tend to reflect on things. When people ask me a question that I want to give a thoughtful answer to, even though I tend to be a chatty Cathy, I actually do take a moment to think about it. So that's a good piece of advice. So what I'm going to share with you today is a way to go into an interview and identify one of 4 different behavioral styles that might be sitting behind that desk. And based on that person sitting behind the desk, some of these things you've mentioned can get a little easier for you, knowing how much to share. Because there's actually a behavioral style that would love for somebody to share and talk about themselves. There's another behavioral style that after 30 seconds they're bored and looking at their phone. So I'm going to teach you those 4 behavioral styles. I'm going to teach you how to recognize them as quickly as I can. Now I've been a behavioral analyst for like 15 years, so I'm trying to condense all of that and give you just a snapshot. And then I'm going to tell you the do's and the don'ts for dealing with that style. So when you recognize that's who you're dealing with, you know their triggers, you know how to, piss them off, and you know how to relate to them better, okay? So here's in my opinion, the number one mistake that most interviewees make. They follow the golden rule. Now, that sounds like a good thing because we've all been taught to follow the golden rule, which is, come on, with a little enthusiasm, we've all been taught it. Wow, you all need to go back to Sunday school. That was terrible. So do unto others as they would have done, oh yeah, do unto others as you would have done unto you. Sorry. So the problem is that doesn't work in communication. So it doesn't work in interviews when you go in and do to the interviewer what you wish someone would do to you. Because everybody's different. And like I said, we're going to identify 4 different types. And if you're one type and they're type 4, and you go in doing what you wish someone would do, you might completely miss what it is that they want from you. So when you're interviewing, this is what I'd like you to do. Forget the golden rule. We have a new rule in town. The platinum rule. Which is simply, do unto others as they would have done unto them. Do unto others as they would have done unto them. Meaning, use your analysis or your skill set that I'm going to teach you to analyze someone, figure out what type they are, know what they want, know what they need, and adapt yourself for better communication and better rapport with them. So here's why reading behaviors, the skill I'm going to teach you, is so important, and you want to learn this before your next interview. One, it increases your self-awareness. So when you leave here, you may not, but you may know something about yourself that you didn't know before, which is huge. Because don't we leave interviews where we didn't get the job? Well, you actually knew, right? You said, I know why I didn't get the job. But sometimes we leave an interview that we thought went really well, we don't get the job, and nobody gives us feedback. So how are we supposed to improve? How are we supposed to adapt and change if we don't get the feedback that we need after interviews? Second, you now can use it to recognize your interviewer's behavioral style, and as I said, adapt yourself to their style to build rapport and increase your chances of being hired. Have you ever heard the saying, people buy from people they know, like, and trust? Anybody ever hear that? People buy from people they know, like, and trust. Well, guess what? They hire the same. They hire people they know, like, and trust. So when you build rapport with them, that goes a long way in you getting the job. When all things else are equal, let me say that. So how many of you have heard of the DISC assessment, the DISC behavioral assessment? Wow, not that many. That's so exciting for the DISC wizard. I usually come in rooms and everybody's heard of DISC and it's like, oh, this thing again, right? This is very exciting. So DISC is a 4-factor behavioral analysis where you can take an assessment and it will tell you how much D, how much I, how much S, and how much C you have. And that's what these, I'll tell you what those stand for. So the D stands for dominance, and it's how you handle problems and challenges. It's how you handle problems and challenges. And by the way, I heard that you will be getting a copy of these slides. Everyone just take a deep breath. Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Especially for you voracious note takers. Yeah, you're all going to get a copy of the slides after the conference. I think Annie will probably send them out like PDF. Okay? The I stands for influence, how you handle people and influence others. Steadiness stands for how you handle change and pace yourself. C stands for compliance, how you handle rules and procedures set by others. And the easiest way to remember what these 4 things measure in a person, just remember those 4 red words. Problems, people, pace, and procedures. That's what these are measuring. And here's the thing. Everyone exhibits these 4 factors in their style, just to different degrees of intensity. So even though I'm going to talk about a high dominant as somebody who is dominant and that's all they've got is dominant, I'm going to teach you how to relate to that person. They may have some influence, steadiness, and compliance in their style as well, but their predominant score or behavior is dominance. Does that make sense? So we're all a blend of all four, just at different degrees of intensity. So here's where these four behaviors come from. Way, way back, so far back none of us even were around, they were observing behavior and noticing that people broke down into two different categories: task-oriented or people-oriented, extroverted and introverted. So with those two different sets of categories, you then have four combinations. So the dominant person is extroverted, but they're task-oriented. So they're talkative, you hear them, they're loud, but they're results-oriented. So they're about the task, not the people. The I person, the influence person, is extroverted and people-oriented. So when I called myself a chatty Cathy, that's me. That's the people of the world. We're friendly, charming, exuberant. The S is people-oriented but introverted. So that was surprising to me because when I learned this, I thought all introverted people were not people-oriented. I thought if you were introverted, you didn't like people. That was my misunderstanding. Turns out there's a lot of people that are introverted, quiet, soft-spoken, but their focus is on people. Then compliance is introverted and task-oriented. So they're more quiet, reserved, maybe shy, and their focus is on the task. From those combinations, you get the four styles. And I am going to feed you a lot of information in the next 30 minutes through like a fire hose. So don't worry, you're going to get the slides, right? Just keep reminding yourself, I'm going to get the slides. And I believe they also make this recording available afterwards. So anything I fly by or fly through too fast and you're feeling like you're not getting it, you can always review the information. So here's D characteristics, and what I want you to think about as I go through these is first, I want you to ask yourself, is this me? Is what she's describing me? Does this sound like me or how other people would describe me? And second, have I ever had an interview with someone like this? So high dominant people are assertive and bold, results-oriented, high-risk takers, future thinkers, self-motivated, strong ego, impatient, argumentative, extroverted, but task-oriented. Any Ds? Any Ds in the room? Nobody wants to admit to being a D? So let me tell you a quick way to recognize a D. Ds tend to be very quick to anger, and I know I have to focus on, it's like I'm focusing on their negative characteristic, but sometimes you recognize people by their negative characteristics more than their positive. Ds tend to be very quick to anger. They're very impatient because their focus is on getting the result. So if they're not getting a result as fast as they want, they get impatient. Because they're task-oriented and not people-oriented, they tend to take that anger and impatience and throw it on the people closest to them. So I was working for two high dominance, they were two brothers. One was CEO, one was VP of a company in Virginia, both 100% dominant. They used to disappear into an office and go at it and scream at each other, obscenities, yelling, like out of control. And their staff outside, that's this other style that I'm going to tell you about, so not D, is like, oh my God, like panicked. If they come out and talk to me like that, I'm just going to cry. Like these women that listened to it just couldn't believe it. And then the brothers would walk out of the office, and guess what they'd be like? Hey, you want to go to lunch? Yeah, are we still playing golf later? Sure, let's grab a drink before. And the women were like, what? Are you kidding me? I wouldn't talk to somebody for a year if they spoke to me like that. And these guys, no big deal. High dominant people are confrontational. And here's the thing, they love confrontation. The problem is, and high dominant people are 18% of the population, so what do you think that means for the other 82%? Not real excited about confrontation. So the 18% are out there doing their thing, communicating the way they communicate. They don't take it personally, so they think you don't take it personally. So when they yell at you because something's not done, they don't think you should take it personally, but that's not how the other styles respond to it. So if you've ever worked for a high dominant person, I'm getting the looks like, yes, I have. Maybe it's why you're here. Then you know the difficulty of working with them. They want fast results. They don't want excuses. They don't take people things into consideration for the most part. Hold on, gotta get a drink. I got all excited about D. So, any of you been interviewed by a high dominant? Probably more than you know. I want to show you how to recognize them and then how to respond. How to recognize the high D interviewer. Well, if he's screaming into the phone, that's a clue. His greeting, or his or her greeting is going to be direct, a firm handshake, and eye contact. So a high dominant person, you can see it in their body language. They're very assertive and aggressive right away. How you doing, John? Nice to meet ya. Right? They're in there. It's a firm handshake. You're not going to get the limp fish with a high dominant person. And their body language is bold and big. They take up their space. Man or woman, by the way. It's a high dominant woman, you'll see her coming.
Kramer type person.
He said a Kramer type person. I think Kramer might be that plus the next one we're going to talk about. Appearance is power suits, bold colors, or ties, all business. The thing you want to remember is D's dress to impress. Not for you to like them. They want to look powerful. So when someone's really put together and they've got maybe the high-end, custom shirt, something like that, might be a clue that they've got some D in them. Gestures, lots of movement, big and bold gestures. Again, they're physical and they take up their physical space, right? They may even get in your space. Their office, when you go into their office, you're going to see status-conscious symbols and emblems, big desk, roomy, trophies, awards. A nightmare for a D would be a little cubicle to work in. It would drive them nuts. They need space. And you're going to see awards and accomplishments, certificates, etc. When I used to sell my services to a lot of managers, mid-level managers, and CEOs, the second I got in their office, I would do like the 10-second scan, Tons of family pictures and real homey, maybe not a D, right? But golf trophies and pictures with the Sopranos and all that, maybe we're talking to a D. Magazines they're going to read. So if you can see in their office, they've got a bunch of magazines around. Fortune, Forbes, Money, Wall Street Journal. The other thing about a D's office, typically very clean. Typically very clean. They like efficiency. They don't want to dig around for stuff. They're not going to have piles on their desk. And at the end of the day, you're going to look in that office, it's going to be clean. For the most part, that's how D's operate. Listening skills, they hardly listen. They will do most of the talking. They will cut you off if you start to ramble. So there's one style that loves to share stories. There's one style that loves to share details and information. The high dominant will cut them both off because they're rambling. Once it's not getting to the point or not getting the result that they want, they'll just pick up the phone, they'll turn to their computer. Anybody ever have a conversation with someone like that where right in the middle they just start to do something else and you're like, I was talking. Dominant person. You lost them. Unless you're talking about something they think is important, you lost them. So driving forces when you're interviewing with a D. So these are the things that are going to give you the green light when you're interviewing with a D. The D doesn't want a lot of facts and figures. Just hit the high points and get to the bottom line. So I don't know the gentleman's name who said he rambled on and on. If that was a D, you lost him. He checked out, 15 seconds in.
I don't think he was necessarily a D, but he let me continue to ramble.
Then he might have been another behavioral style that will just let you go on and on forever. But the D won't. The D usually will interrupt and clarify the question or just interrupt and not do anything. So whatever you're sharing, bottom line it. The best thing is when a D wants more information, they'll ask you. Like if you just give them the bottom line, this tip alone altered my relationship with Ds. I'm a high I, I'm chatty. I give you all the information. I tell you all the stories of why the project's not done. D does not want to know. So when I learned this, and I just learned to bottom line it for the people I worked for, and I would say, you know what, it's not done. It'll be done tomorrow at noon. You have my word. they'd be like, oh, okay. Like they don't know what to do with that kind of decisiveness, right? So give them the bottom line. You must appear credible. Don't try to fake it. So if they pick up that you're trying to get away with something or you're trying to pass off something, they're going to be suspicious. They'll be impressed with an efficient, business-like approach, so don't be disorganized, messy. They'll want to hear about the results you've produced. This is really important because so many of us communicate what we do through the tasks that we do. It's how most job descriptions are, through the tasks of what we do. But whenever you can emphasize the results of what you did, give them the result instead. Start with business. They will let you know if they want to chat about personal stuff. Most Ds do business first, personal second. If they ask you about your family or your vacation or whatever, they're only doing it because someone in HR told them they needed to or told them they should, right? Because they would just cut right to business. And then when business is settled and they like you, they don't like you, whatever, then they would say, so, tell me a little bit about your family, or so, then they'll go into the personal. But don't you start with the personal. Ask questions so they can tell you about their position and operation. I don't know if I mentioned this, but you probably could assume it. Ds have a pretty high ego, right? Pretty high ego strength. So when you can not falsely, pour on the praise, but when you can ask them about their operation, how did you get to this level? Where'd you come from? How long you've been doing this? And they get to share their success, they like that. Here's some hindering factors when you're interviewing with them. Being unclear or wishy-washy with your answers. Here is where I would recommend that pregnant pause, right? Using that moment to collect your thoughts before you launch into something. Not answering questions directly, being vague or beating around the bush. Explaining too many details. Telling long stories or ones that are irrelevant to the topic at hand. Guilty as charged. Not admitting to any failures or shortcomings, the walk on water syndrome, like, oh, I'm perfect, I've never made a mistake. Trying to charm them or use humor too soon. So if you're a high I like me, which we're going to talk about next, this is one of the biggest mistakes I have made in my professional life with high dominant people. I have tried to charm them. I have done my little song and dance and expected them to think it was great and have them just level me. I could tell you stories. If you want to hear stories where I've been on a sales call and I had a high dominant just take me out because I tried to charm them. So here's the thing. If you're a humorous person, if that's how you deal with your nerves, because people get in nervous situations, they start joking around. Yeah, suspend that. Put it aside. When they're ready to play with you and have fun and get to know you personally, they will let you know. But don't try and do it too soon or you can get a really caustic reply from them. Touching them or close talking. No. Not good for a D. Don't touch them and don't get in their personal space. In their report, when you get a behavioral assessment, a DISC assessment, in the dominance reports under communication don'ts, I think it is, it'll say give them 3 feet of space. That's a lot for close talkers, for people, right? 3 feet of space so that you don't invade their personal space. Okay, I don't have time for questions, sorry. I will stay afterwards though. If you have questions after on anything that I present, just ask me, I'll stay, just because if I don't keep moving, we're not going to make the time limit. So typical high I characteristics, people-oriented. So they're enthusiastic and optimistic. They connect quickly. They're engaging. They're persuasive and motivating. Good sense of humor, which is why they try to charm and joke with the D. Charismatic, trusting, rose-colored glasses. So they're very optimistic and they tend to paint a good picture on everything. Overlook important details. And people-oriented and extroverted, like I mentioned, so everybody's their BFF. Like high I interviewers are great to interview with because they love everybody. They make you feel really comfortable. I once honestly had an interview with this woman. I didn't get the job, but she and I are still friends to this day. I just went to her wedding last summer. We're two high eyes, right? We were best friends immediately. I didn't get hired, but we were best friends immediately. So you can connect with them really quickly, but there are still some things you need to know about communicating to them so that you still present yourself in the best light. So how to recognize them. Greeting, smile, eye contact, friendly, long handshake. So the high eye is the only person I know that does this. Hi, Lisa, it's so nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself. Your eyes are beautiful. They're so blue. How long have you been here? Oh, my God. Right? And the whole time, they're holding your hand with two hands. And she's like, I'm not a high eye. Let go of me. What are you doing? So if anybody ever does the two-handed handshake with you when they come to interview, immediate high eye. You just know they're a high eye. Okay, appearance, fashionable, flashy, clothes make a statement. So the high eye is usually fashionable. They want to look good. High eyes, it's very important for them to be popular. And so if they have the resources to do so, they will dress well in order for people to think well of them and like them.
So if you're not with their style, you're wrong when you walk into the door.
Run?
Wrong.
You're wrong.
Yeah, if you're not fashionable, flashy.
Oh, me? What? Are you telling me I'm not fashionable and flashy? I have a wizard hat.
No. You are, I'm not.
Oh.
You're high fashion, I'm grunge, vintage.
Oh, grunge vintage. It's a whole new line. I think you've got a future there. Okay, so the high eye gestures, big gestures, again, they're very expressive. Facial expressions, animated. My significant other is also a high eye, so you can imagine what that's like, right? We fight for center stage all the time. When he read his report, he said, how does it know I talk with my hands? I took it on the computer, right? So he had answered the questions. It pegged him as a high eye. It said, you gesture a lot and talk with your hands. You tie his hands, he can hardly speak. That's why when they wanted to give me thank you, handheld mic and the remote, I was like, I don't know what to do with these, so I've got two on instead. Okay, so yes, look for the animation, the expressions, and the big hand gestures. Their office, contemporary, personalized, memorabilia, and here's the real one, fun games or toys. Most high eyes, if it's not on their desk, it's in their desk drawer. The Rubik's Cube, the Magic 8 Ball. I mean, seriously, toys, big thing. When I do a training, I teach DISC, by the way. I certify people in DISC certification. When I have a class where I know I've got all 4 behavioral styles, I bring toys for the D's and the I's. I bring things to do this with for the D's because they can't seem to sit still very long without playing with something to distract them. And if I don't distract them with something, they'll be on their iPhone. The I's love to play with stuff as well. So I put toys out. And people are like, they walk into the training, what are these toys doing here? Because I know my audience. Okay, in magazines, if you see any magazines they're reading, People, Oprah, Psychology Today, Cosmo, Fast Company. They love anything that has to do with people. Listening skills, very chatty. They'll be interested in you truly because they're people-oriented, but they're not going to listen well. They will likely cut you off in a friendly way. You'll say something and they'll go, oh, that happened to me too! Oh my God! But they'll usually upstage you. Okay, driving forces. So here's what to do. Chit-chat and personal talk is okay, but let them take the lead. Right? So with them, start with personal. That's fine. And then get into business. The trick is get into business at all because you can spend an entire hour just chit-chatting. Spare the details. I will not need to hear them. They don't need to know when you graduated college, with what degree and what curriculum. Really, they don't need to know. If they like you, that's enough. Have fun in the interview. Tell stories. It's okay to touch them, but I want to clarify when I say that. Upper forearm or back. I used to share this and then it just said it's okay to touch them and people were like, what? You need to clarify. Okay, high eyes like sincere flattery. So compliment the pictures of their kids, their outfit, their office. As long as it's sincere, it's a good thing to do. Recognize their accomplishments. Use testimonials and drop names. High eyes really put a lot of weight on what other people that they admire and respect think. Okay? So if you know someone in common, mention that. Yes.
So if you know who this interview person is, you should go out to their link site, and if they got a lot of connections, this is a I-type person?
They may have a lot of connections, but I didn't know where you were going with that. But I was just going to say, don't fake knowing somebody or don't make a connection just to kind of get in with the high I. If it's an honest connection, definitely use it.
Everyone on their list is they know personally.
They may.
They've worked with.
That is true. Drop names, and again, I mean if they know somebody that you know, or if you've worked with someone that they've worked, or a place that you know they worked. Be enthusiastic and mention how much you want to work for the company. You would not believe how many hiring managers have debriefed an interview with me and at the end said, yeah, but you know what? They never even told me they wanted the job.
You're with me.
Oh, sorry. They never told the interviewer that they wanted the job. And the interviewer remembered it. They were saying, I like this about them, I like this about them. They never really said they wanted the job. So I tell everybody, make sure you tell them that you want to work there. If you're truly interested in it, tell them why. High I's especially, they want to hear that. Here's the hindering factors. Letting them talk so much that you fail to make an impression. Because the high I might just take over and tell you everything about the operation and their job, etc. And then they don't even know you by the end of the interview. Droning on and on with your stories, because what does a high I want to do? They want to tell theirs, right? They want to talk. Being cold and impersonal. So if you're kind of a more reserved personality, we're going to get to the reserved next, and we're going to go really quickly. You might have to warm it up a bit. You might have to be a little bit more playful, a little bit more engaging, smile a little bit more, because it's really hard for the high I to warm up to somebody who's so reserved. And the problem with that is if they don't feel comfortable with you, actually reserved people make high I's feel uncomfortable. So if they're not comfortable with you, then are they going to want to work with you, right? So you might have to warm it up a bit. Over impressing them, remember it's all about them. Don't patronize them or talk above their head, be their equal. There is no communication error you can make greater with a high I than condescending or patronizing them. They're so sensitive to it. I don't know why. People have asked me. I have no idea why, but it's true for me, and it's true for other high I's. If we notice condescension or what sounds like patronization, it's an immediate shock. So just be careful if you're being interviewed, and maybe you're being interviewed by somebody who would be a direct report of yours. That does happen nowadays when you get the 360 interview and they're having one of your direct reports interview you. Just be really careful that you don't come across condescending. Okay, moving on to the S. This is the introverted person. Dependable and trustworthy, team player, methodical, patient and deliberate, loyal, humble and modest, reserved but friendly, slow to make changes, slow to trust, and again, they're people-oriented and introverted. And by the way, this is the majority of the population. When you break down the DISC in percentages, they're at about 40% of the population. So they're so wonderful. It's hard to believe they'd ever be out of a job, right? Everybody wants somebody who's loyal and hardworking, and these are the people that are dependable. They will be there at 7 o'clock at night finishing. Closure is very important to them, so they need that sense of completion. So here's how to recognize them. Their greeting will be professional, friendly, but not overly, because they're introverted. They're simply dressed, not flashy or drawing attention. Their gestures are small gestures and they're poker-faced. It's really hard to tell what an S is thinking. They can have a good day and a bad day and it looks just the same. Whereas a high I, their emotions all over their face. It's not hard to tell at all. So S's are a little trickier to pick out. When you learn DISC for the first time, D's and I's, they're easy, right? S's are a lot harder because they're reserved. In their office, you're going to find family snapshots, a homey atmosphere. S's aren't flashy, but they're very family oriented. So you want to look for those things. Magazines, Reader's Digest, National Geographic, Better Homes and Gardens, again, a people interest, home. Great listener will ask questions and let you do most of the talking. So this is the type of person that would let you ramble on and on and on, and they'd never say anything. They would just listen. They're really great at observing, and they're very intuitive. So they actually make great interviewers. They might go with the pre-planned questions, right, that they've been given, but they're great at listening and picking up on things because they're quiet and they don't talk so much. They're more intuitive. So here's the things to do. Take it slow and easy. If you go too fast, you'll lose them. So who do you think that applies to? Which style? The D's, right? The D's are fast, impatient, want to get everything done. If you're a D interviewing with an S, slow it down. May require additional interviews for reassurance before the decision is made. These are the ones that want to meet you several times before they make a decision. I just saw the eye roll. Oh. That's how they build trust, is through multiple meetings. They don't extend trust easily. Give thorough references and offer to arrange the phone calls. You want a leg up when you're interviewing, offer to do their dirty work for them. S's sometimes don't even like to call for pizza. So instead of them having to go through HR and get the standard reply from your past managers or past companies that you work for that really tells them nothing, offer to arrange the calls for them. You know what I could do? I could actually set up phone calls with my 2 past managers if that would be helpful to you. Are you kidding? Would it be helpful? Amazing leg up. Be sincere, use a quiet manner, simple explanations, and explain details. They've got the patience and they will listen to them. Don't be pushy or overly dogmatic, D's. Give assurance why their decision to hire you is right. So again, take that time at the end to say, I want this position, I'd enjoy working here, I think we'd really do, great things together, or whatever it is. Hindering forces, speaking too fast, getting too friendly or personal in the first meeting. Again, it takes S's a while to trust. So if you're a gregarious person and you rush it, their defenses go up. Loud, emotional presentation, I would not work for them. I used to actually present to a lot of engineers and financial planners, if you can imagine, and I had to totally tone it down. I had to just take it down a notch. Being shallow with answers to questions, not having answers or faking the answers. Bad-mouthing current employer. Why do you think bad-mouthing a current employer would be a problem? Who said that? Bingo. Because they're loyal. They have a lot of loyalty. So they're looking at it and thinking, wow, if you're bad-mouthing the last guy, I'm going to be the next guy, right? So that's a no-no with an S. Even when things aren't going well at your current employer, don't bring it up. Rushing them for a decision, I'll call you tomorrow, they won't have an answer tomorrow. They may have to talk to people, think about it, sleep on it, meditate on it, and then call you in for another interview. So just ask them, what would be an appropriate time frame for me to follow up with you, and let them tell you when to follow up. Okay, typical characteristics of a high C: logical and objective, accurate and precise, detail-oriented, skeptical and critical. So these are people, they're analyzers. They think through things. They don't take you at face value. They don't believe everything you've told them, and they read everything. And they research everything. They're perfectionists. If the compliance is high enough, they're a perfectionist. They're reserved and not emotional, so it's hard to read them, just like the S. They'll need to ask a lot of questions and need a lot of information from you. So this is the person you need to have your ducks in a row with, because they're going to ask. They're task-oriented and introverted. How to recognize them? They're very professional, may avoid eye contact, and cool. So just look for that person who's very reserved. They'll be very businesslike. They'll still shake your hand, but they might pull away first. You also want to give them space as well. They're like the D. They don't want anybody too close. But I think the thing you'll notice the most is that they're reserved and a little bit cool or aloof even. Their appearance, all buttoned up, traditional attire, straight-laced. One of the last companies that I worked for before I started my own company, I was doing the interviewing for new office managers, and I could tell when they came through the door based on what they were wearing, what their DISC assessment was. I remember this one girl came, she was a young girl, so you would have expected her to be a little trendy, right? She had a silk blouse on that tied here, the kind I remember my mom used to wear, right? And she had these little pumps on. She was so conservative looking. We hadn't run her DISC assessment yet, which we did on every candidate, but I knew she was a high C. I'm like, I can't wait to see her report because I got this one. Gestures, very reserved, little or no gestures. I swear some C's, I don't even know if their elbows can leave their side. Like, you just never see them take up their space, right? So they're very reserved and constrained. Office, graphs, charts, functional, organized chaos. Now here's the surprise. People would expect that a C would have this perfectly organized office, right? Know where everything is because they're compliant. Not at all the case. Some C's I know are the messiest people I know. However, open a drawer and it's perfectly organized. Like their general environment would be totally chaotic, but this one drawer, paper clips, everything in there is perfectly organized. And that it happens to be because they have a micro vision, not macro vision. Okay, magazines, consumer reports, IT mags, technical journals. Oh, listening skills will drive the conversation by asking lots of questions. Hopefully that wasn't just a C that I offended. Driving forces, interviewing with a high C, provide a lot of proof, background information. They need time to absorb the details and digest the facts before going to the next step. So if they're sitting, listening, and considering, give them time. Don't rush to the next thing. Highly suspicious of boasting or grandiose claims. They're suspicious, so be able to back up what you say. Be able to prove that. Make sure references are from others with a C behavioral style. This will lend credibility. So if you've worked for and can get a good reference from another high C, can you see how putting two high Cs on the phone together would be a smart thing to do rather than a high I past manager of yours that would just go on and on about how wonderful they are? The high C is going to lend more credibility to the other high C. Don't waste time with small talk. Again, they're going to want to get down to business. Get right to the point with plenty of information. Answer all their questions and answer them thoroughly. Hindering factors, getting personal about families or hobbies, touching or patting them on the back when you first meet them, loud emotional presentation or style, again, it's going to be a turnoff for them. Being shallow with answers to questions, this is a big one. A lot of high Cs are like professional proofreaders. They can look at a resume and it's like they can zero in on the one thing that's inaccurate. And by the way, statistically speaking, about 75% of resumes have some inaccuracy in them. Whether it's intentional or whether it's unintentional, that's the statistic. So when you're going to interview with a high C, just make sure all of that stuff is cleaned up. Being late or otherwise not prepared. That would be a turnoff to the high C. Being giddy, silly, or anything that could be interpreted as not serious about the opportunity. So again, these are very serious people. The challenge is you're in an interview, so you're a little stressed and under the gun, so you might be a little nervous, but just be aware that if you're overly laughing, joking, etc., they might actually consider that you're not serious when that might not be true. Okay, whew, I did it. Look at the time. We have like 2 minutes. That's a miracle, by the way, for a high I. Can I get some applause? Oh, thank you. That, by the way, is so it's on the recording so we can edit it and they'll just think you were clapping for me. Okay, so the do-it-yourself career discovery process. So when I share this information, people, usually want more. Obviously, you're going to want the slides because you need to see it and review it. But they usually want to know more of what to do with this information. It's intriguing. They now know their style. They might be able to recognize other people's style. But what do we do with this information? So I do have something for you. I have this process that I put together a few years ago. Actually, it was, wow, it's more than a few. It was right at the crash, 2007, 2008, because I was being asked to speak to so many people that were in transition. So I put this together to try and take my wisdom and my knowledge from, again, the other side of the desk and give it to the people who needed it the most. So in this process, you're going to get your own DISC behavioral assessment. That is a $100 value. That's what I charge every client of mine. It's 26 pages, all about you and your behavioral style. The Career Discovery e-guide containing a 5-step formula for discovering your dream career. If I had not done that 5-step formula, I would not own my own business today. You think I might be in the right job? Yeah? There was something in that formula. I had 4 of the steps, right? Because that was what career counselors had taught me, the 4 steps. The 5th thing it was an inventory that I took, clarified for me that I needed something called enterprise control. And when I read about it, I went, oh, interesting. So at 32, I started my own business. And I don't think had I not had that 5th step that showed me what I needed to be completely satisfied in a job, I don't think I would have done it at that age. And then a bunch of bonuses, because I want you to be able to take this information and just run with it. So the first one is an audio recording on how to understand and capitalize on your DISC style. So once you get your DISC assessment, you're going to have questions. You're going to want to know more information. You're going to want to go more in depth with it. That's what that audio is going to do for you. The second bonus is how to use DISC for greater interview success presentation. So it takes this information and goes deeper. Third, how to achieve your most important goals. The reason I did that, it was actually a teleclass that I did with a group of people. The reason I did it was because I noticed that I consistently set goals that I didn't reach. I was one of the, and they only say that about 10% of the population even sets goals. I was one of the 10% that set them. I was doing half of it, but I wasn't achieving my goals, and I was frustrated. So I found a new process about goal setting. Actually, the reason a lot of people don't achieve their goals when they set them is because we set them wrong right from the beginning. We don't even have a shot because of how we set our goals. So that's what I included in that information. And then last, an audio that I did on Taming the Time Bandit, Master Time Management. How many of you have noticed that you seem to be busier now than you were when you had a job? Is that not the craziest thing in the world? You took 40 to 50 hours and removed it from your schedule, and suddenly time management is a problem. Believe me, I went through it. I couldn't believe it. Like, where did that time go? Why am I now so busy? It's basically my system for how I manage my time. And this is total package value, $536. But today, there's a special. It's only $197. Now, here's the thing. I had no idea that there were going to be this many people here. So I didn't print enough forms. I only have like 30 forms. There's 3 offers on here. There's a lower level offer than that, and then there's a higher level offer. If you're interested, I'm just going to pass it out to the people who are interested because I didn't print enough forms. But that is the end of the presentation. So thank you so much, and thanks for your staying a few minutes past.